Is being recorded.
Hello, everyone. Juxtaposition here. Hope you're enjoying your day with your Juxtaposition 1 coffee mug, sipping sweet nectars from this urn. All right, this can also hold adult beverages as well as your favorite cup of joe. All right, behind me here, this is Richard Milhous Nixon, and he was elected president of the fake United States of America, a Swiss colony, and was certified by the Electoral College on January 6th, 1969. Today's video was really celebrate the beginning of the pseudo presidency of Richard Milhous Nixon. I'm going to call this video 1969 in isolation. I'm just going to look at the 1969, the final year of the roaring, raging 1960s, which of course brought us the John F. Kennedy assassination in a pyramid triangle park, George Dealey Park, with an obelisk, killed by shooters at the railroad trestle over Main Street, concealed for 60 years. It brought us that. It brought us the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which followed the Kennedy assassination, and a 10-year war in Vietnam, of which Richard Nixon fueled to a higher level. He ran on the principles of terminating the war with dignity and leaving Vietnam. But of course, he did the exact reverse of that. But Richard Nixon was never at any time in charge of Vietnam. Neither was Lyndon Baines Johnson, and neither was Gerald Ford, the bungling buffoon Warren Commission member from Michigan, congressman from the state of Michigan, Gerald Ford, who hits people in the head with golf balls. The bumbling, kind of cackling cacophony of chaos, Kamala Harris, in the form of Jerry Ford, good friend of Bob Hope of Toluca Lake and Palm Springs, California. All right, so enormous amounts of things happened in 1969. You know, I was a very busy, motivated paper boy at that time. And every day I got up and I delivered and folded my papers and delivered them. It was a satisfying job. It was fun to read the headlines before anyone else did. That was the high point of the job, was I was able to get first look at what was to be presented as the national news. And I'm going to review with you things that were reported as newsworthy. Do remember that the most of the things in the 1969 year were concealed from the public. The most important things were concealed from the public, like the Haight-Ashbury project in San Francisco, which is a military operation that dates back to the Spanish establishing the Presidio Army Base in San Francisco, and then known as Yerba Buena. Yerba Buena was San Francisco in 1776. That's when military intelligence took over the entire peninsula of the San Francisco County and San Mateo County area. All right, but I wanted to walk you through some dates. And so here we go. Get your coffee mug, fasten your seatbelt. You might want to put eye protection on. Okay, before Richard Nixon was inaugurated as president, January 1st, New Year's Day, prisoners of war from North Vietnam were released on January 1st, 1969, as part of a North Vietnam gesture having to do with ongoing negotiations to end the Vietnam War. This marked a significant movement for the families of the POWs whose loved ones were released from the Hanoi jails. You know, where years later, Jane Fonda got a ticket to ride with the film crew to go to Hanoi. The Marines couldn't invade Hanoi. The United States Army couldn't invade Hanoi. The United States Air Force couldn't invade Hanoi. But Jane Fonda, a actress from Clute and Barbarella, she waltzed in there with no problems for 10 days. All right. Anyway, that happened on the New Year's Day, January 1st, 1969. The next day, day 2, January 2nd, Rupert Murdoch entered the fake news business, the Mockingbird Media business. Rupert Murdoch acquired News of the World. Rupert Murdoch's News Limited acquired News of the World newspaper, making his the very first acquisition into the United Kingdom market media place. This move established Rupert Murdoch's presence in Fleet Street and set the stage for his subsequent expansion into British media, British Mockingbird fake media, because there is no British media. There's only Geneva, Switzerland, and Geneva Anthropology. That's the only narratives that exist in the world today. All right. Then Marvin Gaye hit the Billboard 100 charts, and on January 4th, Marvin Gaye's cover to the song "I Heard It Through the Grapevine" topped the charts of the Billboard Hot 100. All right. That track became one of Marvin Gaye's signature songs, and it is considered a classic of Motown genre. But of course, I prefer the Amy Winehouse, Paul Weller interpretation of that song, as you know. On January 13th, 13th being the unity amongst Masons, it was the Beatles who released their Yellow Submarine album. That was released on January 13th, 1969. This album served as a soundtrack for an animated film by the same name, Yellow Submarine, and it featured 4 new Beatles songs and a side of an orchestra music composed by George Martin, who later is knighted Sir George. This is all for the military contracting firm EMI. EMI produced the Beatles. They're a military contracting firm. All right. This release of the album Yellow Submarine was part of the Beatles' ongoing expansion into various music media and artistic expressions, which the Tavistock Institute and the Frankfurt School and the Royal Air Force and British intelligence would have some influence. And the Beatles, of course, would have zero influence whatsoever on their music. They didn't write their music. You know, on January 17th, Led Zeppelin debuted their album, and it was released into the United States. Led Zeppelin's self-titled debut was released into the United States on January 17th. The album was produced by Jimmy Page and showcased the band's unique blend of hard rock and blues influences. It did receive a positive reception. It reached number 10 on the Billboard chart and earned gold certification by the summer, July 1969. Gold record status. All right. What else can I tell you? We had an assassination attempt on the premier Leonid Zabrinsky in Russia. It was unsuccessful. January 25th, we had the Paris peace talks on the Vietnam War were commenced. Richard Milhous Nixon was inaugurated on January 20th as the 37th president of the United States. He introduced in his inauguration speech the new vocabulary word called Vietnamization, which nobody understood what he's talking about. It has to do with the transition of the American-run war, which is NATO, to the South Vietnamese Army regulars. That the South Vietnamese, which had no army before NATO showed up, that they were going to be in charge. This is poppycock and balderdash. You know that NATO has installed Agroville, Strategic Hamlet, Search and Destroy. They produced the Cords program, which was operating at the time of Richard Nixon's inauguration speech. They then rolled out Operation Phoenix immediately upon the Tet Offensive, which was occurring in January and February 1968. The Tet Offensive was followed by the Phoenix program and the My Lai massacre, which was March 16th, 1968, preceding the Richard Nixon inauguration. So when Richard Nixon is talking about transitioning the decision-making for the war to the South Vietnamese army, he's bald-faced lying. Of course, there'll be no changes whatsoever. The same people ran the Vietnam War as ran the Gulf of Tonkin incident back in the summer of 1964. All right. You should also know that Earl Warren, the Chief Justice of the United States and the pseudo author of the Warren Report, Warren Commission, he steps down from the highest court in the land and effectively retires. Earl Warren, who does get a building named after him on the University of California, Berkeley campus, the Earl Warren building. He also got a freeway named after him, Highway 13. It had already been named after him. He was the governor of California, and he got that freeway, which was Highway 13. It's also known as Tunnel Road and Ashby Avenue, but it's always Highway 13. We refer to it as Highway 13, the Earl Warren Freeway. He leaves, and Richard Nixon arrives on January 20th, 1969. You do know that the Tet Offensive happened the year before, followed by the My Lai Massacre the year before, but the My Lai Massacre was not covered in the media until really September 1969. So we're going to come to that later. Chuck Noll becomes the Pittsburgh Steelers' new coach on January 27th. Yasser Arafat becomes the new leader of the Palestinian Liberation Army, Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO. Yasser Arafat is both the leader and also the chairman. Vince Lombardi joins the Washington Redskins in their management positions. All right. Then we have on February 17th, the Apollo 9 mission launch occurs. This was a precursor to the phony fake moon landings. I hope nobody listening believes in the moon landing. On February 22nd, 1969, the Beatles began recording Abbey Road. This is the beginning of the end of the Beatles. The Beatles never really recorded a single album after Abbey Road. Let It Be was recorded already, but not released. It was in the recording can, and a lot of people think that that Let It Be was the final album of the Beatles. Not true. Abbey Road was the final album of the Beatles. Then after that, they Alan Klein, their new manager, released Let It Be after Phil Spector edited it. So it's confusing. It's just like the My Lai Massacre. Something occurs, but it's kept secret until time goes by. In the case of the My Lai Massacre, 18 months go by before the media reports it. In the case of Let It Be, I think that was done in the summer of 1968, but it wasn't released until 1969 later, And we had court appearances for Sirhan Sirhan on February 28, 1969. Sirhan Sirhan is an innocent scapegoat, did not kill Robert Francis Kennedy, did not. Robert Kennedy was killed by a Lockheed Skunk Works employee, a Filipino man by the name of Eugene. What was his name? Eugene. I just forgot the name of the killer of Thane Eugene Caesar. Thane Eugene Caesar shot Robert Kennedy. Thane Eugene Caesar was an employee of Lockheed Corporation in Burbank at the Skunk Works, the highest security level of Lockheed. He worked as a security guard at the Ambassador Hotel one day only and was holding Robert Kennedy's right elbow when Robert Kennedy was shot in the right skull behind his right ear. And there's only one person that could have made that kill shot, and that was Thane Eugene Caesar of Lockheed. All right, that's who killed Robert Kennedy. He was never arrested. He was never even brought in for questioning. And he was not charged with the murder because he's the murderer. All right. what else I got here? We on June 28th, we had the Stonewall riots back in New York. This was the LGBTQ civil rights protest gone haywire. On July 4th of 1969, we had the murder and assassination of Darlene Ferrin, who is the daughter of United States Navy workman at Mare Island in Vallejo. And with her boyfriend, she's married, has a husband, but she's dating Michael Michaud, and they're both shot. But it's clear that Darlene Ferrin, that's her married name, not her maiden name, she's targeted and she's killed. And the killers allow Michael Michaud to jump into the rear seat of this Corvair car that was owned by Darlene. And most of the bullets went into Darlene. I think 9 bullets from a 9mm went into Darlene, and 1 or 2 bullets went into Michael Michaud in the rear seat, and he didn't die. Okay, it was just a killing of Darlene Ferrin inside the city of Vallejo on the city limit at the Blue Rock Springs Park at approximately 10:15, 10:30 the night following the fireworks, which were on the west side of town. You should know that Blue Rock Springs Park is on the complete opposite east side of town, and most of the people that evening, I have airplanes all over my head right now, and that one is very low. It sounds like 600 feet above my roof. What you should know, people, is that we have there's no Zodiac killer identified at this time. So we just have the killing of Darlene Ferrin, age 22, with a 19-year-old Michael Michaud in the back seat behind her, who's just fragged. All right, so you got that going on, and there's no such Zodiac person at this time. Even though there have been a number of other cases, we had 2 people killed in 1968 in December near Christmas time. We had Betty Jo Bates and David Faraday were killed by AR-15 rifles in Solano County, outside the city of Vallejo, outside the city of Benicia, at the gun range for the Sheriff's Department of Solano County. Just so you know, the very first killer that's attributed eventually to the Zodiacs was on the sheriff's gun range property. Does that make sense to you? Maybe it was a sheriff's deputies who did it. It would take more than one person to commit that crime, and his name's not Zodiac, okay? But anyway, I'm just telling you, the murder of 2 people in December 1968 was actually done at the rifle and pistol range for the Solano County Sheriff's Department. Does that change your interpretation of how Zodiac works? I mean, it must be very friendly with the Sheriff's Department. Anyway, James Earl Ray pleads guilty to the Martin Luther King assassination, despite the fact he's innocent. This was done on March 10th, 1969. James Earl Ray pled guilty to killing Dr. Martin Luther King in Memphis, Tennessee. He was given a sentence of, guess what, 99 years in prison. That's a mark of the beast, 666, right? 99 is a 18, 18 is a 666. So that's letting you know that James Earl Ray is innocent. He didn't kill anyone. All right. Paul McCartney, or the pseudo Paul McCartney, or the Billy Shears pseudonym, marries Linda Eastman, a Jewish woman from upstate New York. Linda Eastman and Paul McCartney are wed on March 12th, 1969. It was a private ceremony, and this was the beginning of a long partnership involving the band Wings, Band on the Run. All right. We have John Lennon and Yoko Ono getting married more or less around the same time. I don't have the date for that. Remember, they went to get married in Paris, France, were denied a license in France. Then they went to Portugal. Then they went to Gibraltar and got married in Gibraltar. Then they flew to Amsterdam and had a bed-in for peace on their honeymoon at the Hilton Hotel in Amsterdam, which of course makes no sense whatsoever that you would have a political peace movement bed-in for peace during your honeymoon. This is, of course, a business trip. All right. On March 30th, 1969, Dwight D. Eisenhower lies in state at the U.S. Capitol. The body of the former president, Dwight Eisenhower, and former Supreme Commander of NATO lies in state. He served as the 34th president from 1953 to 1961. He passed away on March 28th, 1969, so he's relevant. You should know that Eddie Merckx wins the Tour of Flanders on March 31st, 1969. That was the 53rd edition of the Tour de Flanders, which is a very famous monument of cycling. And it's a major one-day classic monument race. Eddie Merckx goes on to become the most celebrated road cyclist in history before Tadej Pogačar came along with his electric motor, demolishing most of Eddie Merckx's records, are falling gradually into insignificance. All right, what else I got? Well, you can't miss the fake moon landing, right? We had the fake landing on the moon on July 20th of Apollo 11, and the fake astronauts who never went into space. Neil Armstrong, who Lance Gunderson named himself after. Lance Gunderson despised his baby daddy, so he renamed himself Armstrong after a fake astronaut. So you have a fake 7 times Tour de France champion sponsored by Nike with a yellow bracelet. You have a corrupt sneaker company, Nike, paying money to endorse a Lance Gunderson renamed Armstrong, who goes on to be the biggest drug cheat in the history of all sports, which of course is unfair since all sports are equally doped as Lance Armstrong, and all Nike endorsements from, Roger Federer of Switzerland to Michael Jordan to LeBron to Kobe Bryant to Alex Rodriguez to Michael Vick to Marion Jones. They're all Nike. They're all doped. Just do it. Just lie. Just cheat. Nike. So Lance Gunderson became Lance Armstrong after a fake astronaut by the name of Neil Armstrong, who's an actor. He's a Hollywood actor. And the reason you know he's a Hollywood actor, he has 4 stars at Hollywood and Vine Street, Hollywood Boulevard and Vine Street in West Hollywood. You'll see 4 stars for Neil Armstrong. They're crescent moon stars. It's a special category for fake astronauts. Buzz Aldrin was given 4 stars also, as was Mike Collins, who did not visit the moon, but rode the Uber taxi and orbited the moon for 3 days before they returned home and landed safely in the Pacific Ocean to be greeted by Richard Nixon behind my head. And they didn't have a single heat shield on their command module. You see what happens with the space shuttle Columbia when it tries to land and it loses a few heat shields. It blows to smithereens, right? Killing everyone on board. But that didn't happen with Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong and Mike Collins. They came from further out. They came from over 240,000 miles away, full speed, and very hot on reentry. No heat shields and no problem. So, but why not? It's a fake operation. Then we're told that we have this operation of Gladio murders in Cielo Drive, in Benedict Canyon, Beverly Hills, and also in Silver Lake area at 3301 Waverly Drive. The murder of Lino LaBianca, who is a Army intelligence officer involved with money laundering and involved with Johnny Roselli at the Santa Anita racetrack, has 11 horses stabled at Santa Anita. Lino LaBianca lives in the Walt Disney Mansion at 4053 Woking Way. and is moving out of that house to buy a horse farm in North San Diego County in Vista, which is 2 hours to the south. And he's working with Roy Norwood, who is the controller of Gateway Markets, which is 5 retail grocery stores and a wholesale produce business called State Produce. And they're laundering drug and gun sales that are generated by the Straight Satan's Motorcycle Group, and they run it through their laundromat known as the grocery stores. This is a brilliant place, like a casino, right? It's easy to launder money. And Lino is the heir apparent to that business, being the only son of Pasqualino LaBianca. Lino's named after his father, Pasqualino, but they call him Lino. And they changed the spelling to Leno instead of Lino, but Pasqualino is spelled Ino. Any case, you should know that they want to pin this on a scapegoat, but they don't do that for 4 months. For 4 months, we don't know who killed Sharon Tate or Abigail Folger. We don't know they don't even know who Abigail Folger is. And she's the most important person killed in Beverly Hills. But in any case, nobody knows who Lino LaBianca is either. And he's the most important person of all 7 people killed was Lino LaBianca, who's running a money laundering facility using grocery stores and the Straight Satan's Motorcycle Club out of Venice Beach, California, which is an unincorporated township of Los Angeles County. Venice is not a city. It's a place. That's where Arnold Screw Your Freedom Schwarzenegger injected steroids to grow his muscles with lifting weights at Muscle Beach. It's where Anne Heche bought a red wig before she was disappeared, not murdered, but just disappeared, from Richard Glass of the Richard Glass Hair Design, which is adjacent to Arnold Schwarzenegger's Muscle Beach. Danny DiCarlo and Joe Durgan had offices at that place too, at the Straight Satan's Clubhouse on Clubhouse Way, at the beach, at Venice Beach, which is at Muscle Beach. You see, there's multiple operations going on in Venice and Hollywood. Church of Scientology, they got an office too. All right, anyway, I wanted to tell you that nothing happened for 4 months, and we got out to Thanksgiving 1969, and a decision was not made by the police department. It was made by Evel Younger and Aaron Stovich of the district attorney's office to blame the entire murders, the 7 murders, on a Hollywood COINTELPRO operative who they call Charlie Manson. His real name is Maddox, no name Maddox, and he's been a pseudonym for Hollywood is Charlie Manson. They're going to blame him and some girls he doesn't really even know. Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel doesn't really know those girls, spent minimal time with them. And also Charlie Watson, who's a mama's boy from Texas and a really good athlete, but has an injured leg and could not be climbing up any telephone poles or disabling any telephone lines because he can barely walk, because he had a motorcycle accident just a few weeks prior to the murder of Sharon Tate. He did go to his draft board. He was given a physical examination to go into the military services at the select draft board, and they disqualified him because of his knee injury. Otherwise, Charlie Manson would have been in basic training. Charlie Watson would have been in basic training, but were it not for his motorcycle accident, he was exempted from basic training and the draft. So Evel Younger blamed him for the killings, which is preposterous because he's only 23 years old and he's injured, and there's no murder weapons that were ever found in these cases. There's no fingerprints ever found in these cases either. Well, there were fingerprints found, just not of the people that they sent to the gas chamber. So anyway, you had a complete phony fake trial that went on in 1970, covered by Joan Didion, who bought the slut dresses for the defendants and the peasant dress for their number one witness, Linda Kasabian, 18-year-old mommy of 2 little girls. And I'm here to tell you it's a farce. I don't want to get off track. But Charlie Manson had nothing whatsoever to do with the murder of any persons at all. He was busy with Jim Jones and People's Temple in San Francisco and in Philo and Ukiah and the Greenfield Ranch in Mendocino County. And he had a home in Santa Barbara, and he had a home in Bel Air, living with Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. And he had a home in Pacific Palisades at the Will Rogers Estate. And he had a home in Canoga Park at a number 13 address in Canoga Park, with 2 houses and a big barn garage that's about 6 miles away from the Spawn Ranch, which they're really, just don't forget Spawn Ranch. Think Santa Susana Research Lab. It's a military base of 2,750 acres. 2,750 acres, military base, for the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, joint use, Boeing, Lockheed, Aerojet, Jet Propulsion Labs, JPL, Caltech. They all use the property. It includes Box Canyon, the Fountain of the World Church with Krishnaventa. George Spawn Ranch is 40 acres of the 2,750 acres, meaning it's a microscopic little dot. And they have the Iverson Ranch and a Corriganville Ranch next door. That's another 1,500 acres of land. So if you add those 3 properties together, you're going to get something a lot closer to 5,000 acres of land, which Charlie Manson controlled 0 of. He rode one of the rental horses once, got comped on a rental horse for a photo op. But anyway, anyone who believes that Charlie Manson is involved with any homicide crimes basically is an augmented person and doesn't understand COVID, doesn't know molecular engineering, doesn't understand human augmentation, because they themselves are fully augmented and they're incapable of using their tenets of thinking and are fully disabled. All right. You should know that in 1969, a postage stamp cost 6 cents. 6 cents for a first-class postage stamp. All right. The number 1 song on the Billboard 100 list when Sharon Tate and Abigail Folger and Lena LaBianca were murdered on August 9th and 10th, 1969, number 1 song was Sugar Sugar by the Archies, which is a Saturday morning cartoon. In other words, it wasn't Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones. Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones had the number 2 song. Honky Tonk Woman was number 2. In other words, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards were supplanted by a cartoon song called Sugar Sugar, which is created in the Brill Building with Don Kirshner and RCA. RCA created the Archies. They also created the Monkees. The Monkees, remember the Monkees? They were big time before the murder of Sharon Tate. All right. What else I got? Seymour Hersh, the man who plagiarized Roland Rettenhouse. Roland Rettenhouse wrote a 13-page letter with diagrams, GPS coordinates outlining the My Lai massacre, and he mailed it to 33 people, allegedly, to congressmen, National Security Council members, and Richard Nixon personally. And the CIA, of course, intercepted this, photocopied it, and gave it to a pseudo-journalist to control the narrative before it got out. Ronald Rettenheimer was not present at My Lai, but he knew many people who were present there. And Ronald Rettenhauer had been involved in atrocities of a smaller scale himself personally as a United States Army soldier in Vietnam. And he waited until he was discharged from the Army before he wrote this letter and mailed it. Otherwise, he would have been court-martialed. So he's a whistleblower, and he blew the whistle. And he mailed it to so many places and newspapers who refused to publish it that the CIA was worried that that story is going to leak. So they put Seymour Hersh in charge to control the narrative. Seymour Hersh works for the CIA. He works for Mockingbird Media. And he is then declared as being the whistleblower and the sleuth who determined what happened at My Lai. He concealed the fact of what happened completely. And there were at least 300 Army men there, and air cover above, colonels involved, and most of that was concealed. Some of it was revealed, but most people didn't remember. The news media did a very poor job of reporting on My Lai, which didn't begin before September 6, 1969, when William Cowley was arrested. and then blamed for the 600 plus murders of My Lai. They blamed it all on a 24-year-old second level lieutenant. He's lieutenant second class. All right. You should know on December 5th, 1969, ARPANET launched and went operative using 4 universities in America to create, today you know it as the Internet of Everything, the IOE. It's the Internet of Everything, because ARPANET has been expanded to not only your cell phone, but also you, your person, without your phone. Your body area network is hooked up to the ARPANET system. So it was the Internet of Things, and then it was the Internet of wearables, and then it was the Internet of everything, human body area network, wireless human body area network. Today, everyone is tethered to the cloud 24/7. Now, if you're vaccinated or you get a flu shot, then you're hyper tethered to the cloud. You have more radio frequency connectivity. It's called connectivity. You have gross connectivity. All right. So we had Apollo 10, Apollo 9, and Apollo 11, and we had fake moon landings, and we then eventually had 4 Hollywood stars, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Mike Collins, celebrating their acting job. Because if you ever saw an interview with Neil Armstrong, it looks like he just robbed a bank and he's looking behind his shoulders, seeing if the police are going to catch him. He always looking like he wanted to go somewhere else. And to roll out and cap off the 1960s of rock and roll, we had the Altamont Free Concert that the media reported 300,000 people attended. BS. Perhaps 900 to 1,000 people is what Juxtaposition says. Sonny Barger was there with his Hells Angels. He had 40 Hells Angels, including himself. So him and 39 other people. There's no way they could guard 1,000 people, let alone 300,000 people. And there's not enough porta potties to support many more than 900 people. Anyway, Mick Jagger sang Sympathy for the Devil whilst an 18-year-old black boy from Berkeley, Meredith Hunter, was bayoneted to death. He was wearing an avocado green tuxedo, and he was killed in front of the stage of Mick Jagger, who was standing on a Masonic sun god. There was a sun god on the stage, and Mick Jagger was standing in the center of it whilst singing Sympathy for the Devil, as an 18-year-old boy from Berkeley is stabbed to death wearing, the only person wearing a tuxedo, and the tuxedo is avocado green. Dumber, Dumber. Grace Slick was there. Neil Young was there. The Grateful Dead were there. Jerry Garcia was there. Bill Graham was not there. Conspicuously absent, Bill Graham. But the Grateful Dead did not perform. And I'm not sure if the Jefferson Airplane performed. I understood that they had an altercation with one of the Hells Angels. And perhaps they didn't do their full set. So you should know that Sean P. Diddy was born, Sean Combs. He was born on November 4th, 1969, right? Isn't that interesting? And that P. Diddy, who goes on to move into the William Paley house on South Mapleton Drive, he moves into the Paley house, which was neighbors with Judy Garland and Humphrey Bogart. And it's just 2 houses away from the Playboy Mansion in Holmby Hills. Playboy Mansion's on Charing Cross Road. That merges into South Mapleton on a Pyramid T. That's where P. Diddy was living. Mickey Mantle, who was number 7, his number 7 number was retired from the New York Yankees on June 8th, 1969. Mickey Mantle's number retired. You should know the Johnny Carson show premiered on ABC television on June 7th, 1969. He had special guests of Don Kirshner, scratch that, Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan, and Doug Kershaw appeared on The Tonight Show on ABC. The Beatles released on June 4th, The Ballad of John and Yoko. That was released June 4th. That's a song that John Lennon credited to the Lennon-McCartney phony fake songwriting team. And it was accompanied by an 8-sided old brown shoe. Despite of its British success, the single faced serious resistance into the United States due to its religious references, leading some radio shows to boycott the playing of John and Yoko's ballad. All right. Well, anyway, that's my video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. That's just isolating 1969 unto itself. Certainly, we had, the SLN Institute, rolled out in 1962 with Henry Miller retiring. Basically, the passing of the baton from Henry Miller in Big Sur to 11 miles down the road at a little Motel 6 Inn Lodge, which they called Esalen, which is the name of the Indian tribe that used to occupy that area. That was in 1962, and we had the murder of John Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy assassinations, all involving scapegoats. None of those cases did we arrest or charge or convict the correct person. We had Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, Lena LaBianca killed, nobody arrested, nobody charged, and then the conviction of scapegoats who were 100% innocent, had nothing to do with the crime, and there's not a scintilla of evidence that they committed the crime either. But they didn't offer a defense, and they had the most unprofessional lawyers that they could possibly have. You could get homeless people to do a better job. And by the way, Charlie Manson's lawyer, Irvine Canterick, he was homeless. He lived in his car behind the courtroom, and the judge let him use his bathroom to clean up for court every day. Used the Judge Older's bathroom to clean up. Charlie Manson's lawyer, who was homeless, living in his car in the parking lot behind the jail and the courtroom. Courtroom and the jail are in the same location. All right, that's my video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. You can see very clearly that we have a situation here where nothing is as you think it is, right? The whole world is fake. It's completely fake. Now, let me just roll you through a couple of cavalcade of pictures here, since I have you. I want to show you that everything revolves around the obelisk in Geneva, Switzerland, the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, which is a paymaster's office for administrative services for the Presidio Army Base. There's no medical treatment that goes on at the medical clinic. That's a cover story. You should know that Jesse Ventura, aka James Janus, he joined the United States Navy effective December 1st, 1969. You should know that Jim Jones of the People's Temple, he was working with Charlie Manson in 1968, very, very closely with Charlie Manson to become a preacher. Charlie Manson was to become a preacher, but then he got the gig at the UC Berkeley campus at Sather Gate to play the guitar, and then it was decided he would be doing a musical record down in Los Angeles, so he's transferred to LA on a yellow school bus that was spray painted black. You should know that Paul Pelosi and Nancy Pelosi moved to the Presidio Heights area, very close to Haight-Ashbury, within 1 mile of Haight-Ashbury. They moved in next door to Dianne Feinstein, who lived, a few blocks away. And that's where the last Zodiac killing was the corner of Cherry Street and Washington Street, which is about a block away from where Paul Pelosi and Nancy lived. Paul Pelosi became a private banker when Abigail Folger was murdered on August 9th, 1969. When she died, her mother was retired. And Paul Pelosi, I believe, took over Enos Mejia's job in Haight-Ashbury out of this building, except that Paul was given an office in the Russ building on Montgomery at Pine Street, which is where all the Sand Hill Road bankers had offices. And that's where he was put up on the 11th floor. Richard Nixon was the president. He was the fake president at the time. That's my video. I hope you enjoyed it. And do like and share it. And I will see you on the next content video. Bye-bye now.